to just relax, chill out to, and hopefully get a little snooze if that's what you want. So the first one I have got here today is, and they're actually all from this book called Japanese Fairy Tales, straight to the point. I'm going to murder the name of the author, Yei Theodora Ozaki, and the book was published in 1908. There's 22 folktales in this book. I'm not going to do all 22. That video would last days, but I thought I would do a few that I thought were quite nice. The first one is called My Lord Bag of Rice. Long, long ago, there lived in Japan a brave warrior known as Tawara Toda, or My Lord Bag of Rice. His true name was Fujiwara Hadasato, and there is a very interesting story of how he came to change his name. One day he sallied forth in search of adventures, for he had the nature of a warrior and could not bear to be idle. So he buckled on his two swords, took his huge bow, much taller than himself, in his hand, and slinging his quiver on his back, started out. He had not gone far when he came to the bridge of Setanogarashi, spanning on one end of the beautiful Lake Biwa. No sooner had he set foot on the bridge than he saw, lying right across his path, a huge serpent dragon. Its body was so big that it looked like the trunk of a large pine tree, and it took up the whole width of the bridge. One of its huge claws rested on the parapet of one side of the bridge, while its tail lay right against the other. The monster seemed to be asleep, and as it breathed, fire and smoke came out of its nostrils. At first, Hadasato could not help feeling alarmed at the sight of this horrible reptile lying in his path, for he must either turn back or walk right over its body. He was a brave man, however, and putting aside all fear, went forward dauntlessly. Crunch, crunch, he stepped on the dragon's body, now between its coils, and without even one glance backward, he went on his way. He had only gone a few steps when he heard someone calling him from behind. On turning back, he was much surprised to see the monster dragon had entirely disappeared, and in its place was a strange-looking man who was bowing most ceremoniously to the ground. His red hair streamed over his shoulders and was surmounted by a crown in the shape of a dragon's head, and his sea-green dress was patterned with shells. Hadasato knew at once that this was no ordinary mortal, and he wondered much at the strange occurrence. Where had the dragon gone in such a short space of time, or had it transformed itself into this man, and what did the whole thing mean? While these thoughts passed through his mind, he had come up to the man on the bridge and now addressed him. "Was it you that called me just now?" "Yes, it was I," answered the man. "I have an earnest request to make to you. Do you think you could grant it to me?" "If it is in my power to do so, I will," answered Hadasato. "But first tell me who you are." "I am the Dragon King of the lake, and my home is in these waters just under the bridge." "And what do you have to ask of me?" asked Hadasato. "I want you to kill my mortal enemy, the centipede, who lives on the mountain beyond," and the Dragon King pointed to a high peak on the opposite shore of the lake. "I have lived now for many years in this lake, and I have a large family of children and grandchildren. For some time past we have lived in terror, for a monster centipede has discovered our home, and night after night it comes and carries off one of my family. I am powerless to save them. If it goes on much longer like this, not only Strange to say, as he followed his host downwards, the water parted to let them past, and his clothes did not even feel damp as he passed through the flood. Never had Hidesato seen anything so beautiful as this palace built of white marble beneath the lake. He had often heard of the Sea King's palace at the bottom of the sea, where all the servants and retainers were saltwater fishes, but here was a magnificent building in the heart of Lake Biwa. The dainty goldfishes, red carp, and silvery trout waited upon the Dragon King and his guest. Hidesato was astonished at the feast that was spread for him. The dishes were crystallized lotus leaves and flowers, and the chopsticks were of the rarest ebony. As soon as they sat down, the sliding doors opened, and 10 lovely goldfish dancers came out, and behind them followed 10 red carp musicians with the koto and the samisen. Thus the hours flew by till midnight, and the beautiful music and dancing had banished all thoughts of the centipede. The Dragon King was about to pledge the warrior in a fresh cup of wine when the palace was suddenly shaken by a tramp, tramp, as if a mighty army had begun to march not far away. Hidesato and his host both rose to their feet and rushed to the balcony, and the warrior saw on the opposite mountain 2 great balls of glowing fire coming nearer and nearer. The Dragon King stood by the warrior's side, trembling with fear. The centipede, those 2 balls of fire are its eyes. It's coming for its prey. Now it's time to kill it. Hidesato looked where his host pointed, and in the dim light of the starlit evening, behind the 2 balls of fire, he saw an enormous long body of a centipede winding round the mountains, and in the light its 100 feet glowed like so many distant lanterns moving slowly towards the shore. Hidesato showed not the least sign of fear. He tried to calm the Dragon King. "Don't be afraid. I shall surely kill the centipede. Just show me my bow and arrows." The Dragon King did as he was bid, and the warrior noticed that he only had 3 arrows left in his quiver. He took the bow and fitted an arrow to the notch, took careful aim, and let fly. The arrow hit the centipede right in the middle of its head, but instead of penetrating, it glanced off harmless and fell to the ground. Nothing daunted, Hidesato took another arrow, fitted it to the notch of his bow, and let fly. Again the arrow hit the mark. It struck the centipede right in the middle of its head, only to glance off and fall to the ground. The centipede was invulnerable to weapons. When the Dragon King saw that even his brave warrior's arrows were powerless to kill the centipede, he lost heart and began to tremble with fear. The warrior saw that he now only had 1 arrow left in his quiver, and if this one failed, he could not kill the centipede. He looked across the waters. The huge reptile had wound its horrid body 7 times round the mountain, and would soon come down to the lake. Nearer and nearer gleamed fireballs of eyes, and the light of its 100 feet began to throw reflections in the still waters of the lake. Then suddenly the warrior remembered they had heard that human saliva was deadly to centipedes, but this was no ordinary centipede. This was so monstrous that even to think of such a creature made one creep with horror. Hidesato determined to try his last chance. So taking his last arrow, and first putting the end of it in his mouth, he fitted the notch to his bow, took careful aim once more, and let fly. This time the arrow again hit the centipede right in the middle of its head, but instead of glancing off harmlessly as before, it struck home to the creature's brain. Then, with convulsive shudder, the serpentine body stopped moving, and the fiery light of its great eyes, 100 feet, darkened to a dull glare like the sunset of a stormy day, and then went out in blackness. A great darkness now overspread the heavens. The thunder rolled, and the lightning flashed, and the wind roared in fury, and it seemed as if the world were to come to an end. The Dragon King and his children and retainers all crouched in different parts of the palace, frightened to death, for the building was shaking to its foundation. At last the dreadful night was over. Day dawned, and beautiful and clear. The centipede was gone from the mountain. Then Hidesaddle called to the Dragon King to come out with him on the balcony, for the centipede was dead, and they had nothing more to fear. Then all the inhabitants of the palace came out with joy, and Hidesaddle pointed to the lake. There lay the body of the dead centipede floating on the water, which was dyed red with its blood. The gratitude of the Dragon King knew no bounds. The whole family came and bowed down before the warrior, calling him their preserver and the bravest warrior in all Japan. Another feast was prepared, more sumptuous than the first. All kinds of fish, prepared in every imaginable way, raw, stewed, boiled, and roasted, served on coral trays and crystal dishes, were put before him, and the wine was the best that Hidesaddle had ever tasted in his life. To add to the beauty of everything, the sun shone brightly, the lake glittered like a liquid diamond, and the palace was 1,000 times more beautiful by day than by night. His host tried to persuade the warrior to stay a few days, but Hidesaddle insisted on going home, saying that he had now finished what he had come here to do, and must return. The Dragon King and his family were all very sorry to have him leave so soon, but since he would go, they begged him to accept a few small presents, so they said, in token of their gratitude to him for delivering them forever from their horrible enemy, the centipede. As the warrior stood in the porch taking leave, a train of fish was suddenly transformed into a retinue of men, all wearing ceremonial robes and dragon's crowns on their heads to show that they were servants of the great Dragon King. The presents that they carried were as follows. First, a large bronze bell. Second, a bag of rice. Third, a roll of silk. Fourth, a cooking pot. Fifth, a bell. Hidesaddle did not want to accept all of these presents, but as the Dragon King insisted, he could not refuse. The Dragon King himself accompanied the warrior as far as the bridge, and then took leave of him with many bows and good wishes, leaving the procession of servants to accompany Hidesaddle to his house with the presents. The warrior's household and servants had been very much concerned when they found that he did not return the night before, but they finally concluded that he'd been kept by the violent storm and had taken shelter somewhere. When the servants on the watch for his return caught sight of him, they called to everyone that was approaching, and the whole household turned out to meet him, wondering much what the retinue of men bearing presents and banners that followed him could mean. As soon as the Dragon King's retainers had put the presents down, they vanished, and Hidesaddle told all that had happened to him. The presents which he had received from the grateful Dragon King were found to be of a magic power. The bell only was ordinary, and as Hidesaddle had no use for it, he presented it to the temple nearby, where it was hung up to boom out the hour of day over the surrounding neighbourhood. The single bag of rice, however much was taken from it day after day for the meals of the knight and his whole family, never grew less, use taking that monkey round any longer. He's too old and forgets his tricks. I beat him with my stick, all I know how, but he won't dance properly. I must now sell him to the butcher and make what money I can out of him. There is nothing else to be done. The woman felt very sorry for the little animal and pleaded for her husband to spare the monkey, but her pleading was all in vain. The man was determined to sell him to the butcher. Now the monkey was in the next room and overheard every word of the conversation. He soon understood that he was to be killed, and he said to himself, "Barbarous indeed is my master. Here I have served him faithfully for years, and instead of allowing me to end my days comfortably and in peace, he is going to let me be cut up by the butcher, and my poor body is to be roasted and stewed and eaten. Woe is me! What am I to do? Ah! A bright thought has struck me. There is, I know, a wild boar living in the forest nearby. I have often heard tell of his wisdom. Perhaps if I go to him and tell him the strait I am in, he will give me counsel. I will go and try." There was no time to lose. The monkey slipped out of the house and ran as quickly as he could to the forest to find the boar. The boar was at home, and the monkey began his tale of woe at once. "Good Mr. Boar, I have heard of your excellent wisdom. I am in great trouble. You alone can help me. I have grown old in the service of my master, and because I cannot dance properly, now he intends to sell me to the butcher. What do you advise me to do? I know how clever you are." The boar was pleased at the flattery and determined to help the monkey. He thought for a little while, and then said, "Hasn't your master a baby?" "Oh yes," said the monkey, "he has one infant son." "Doesn't it lie by the door in the morning when your mistress begins the work of the day? Well, I will come round early, and when I see my opportunity, I will seize the child and run off with it." "What then?" said the monkey. "Why, the mother will be in a tremendous scare, and before your master and mistress know what to do, you must run after me and rescue the child and take it home safely to its parents. And you will see that when the butcher comes, they won't have the heart to sell you." The monkey thanked the boar many times and then went home. He did not sleep much that night, as you may imagine, for thinking of the morrow. His life depended on whether the boar's plan succeeded or not. He was the first up, waiting anxiously for what was to happen. It seemed to him a very long time before his master's wife began to move about and open the shutters to let in the light of the day. Then all happened as the boar had planned. The mother placed her child near the porch as usual while she tidied up the house and got her breakfast ready. The child was crooning happily in the morning sunlight, dabbing on the mats at the play of light and shadow. Suddenly there was a noise in the porch and a loud cry from the child. The mother ran out from the kitchen to the spot, only just in time to see the boar disappearing through the gate with the child in its clutch. She flung out her hands with a loud cry of despair and rushed to the inner room where her husband was still sleeping soundly. He sat up slowly and rubbed his eyes and crossly demanded what his it's true or not, said Hojo. Watanabe, the second night, could not bear the thought that his companion should believe he was afraid, so he answered quickly, "Of course I will go at once and find out for myself." So Watanabe at once got ready to go. He buckled on his long sword and put on a coat of armour and tied on his large helmet. When he was ready to start, he said to the others, "Give me something so that I can prove I have been there." Then one of the men got a roll of writing paper and his box of Indian ink and brushes, and the four comrades wrote their names on a piece of paper. "I will take this," said Watanabe, "and put it on the gate of Rashomon, so tomorrow morning will you all go and look at it? I may be able to catch an ogre or two by then." And he mounted his horse and rode off gallantly. It was a very dark night, and there was neither moon nor star to light Watanabe on his way. To make the darkness worse, a storm came on. The rain fell heavily, and the wind howled like wolves in the mountains. Any ordinary man would have trembled at the thought of going out of the doors, but Watanabe was a brave warrior and dauntless, and his honour and word were at stake. So he sped on into the night, whilst his companions listened to the sound of the horses' hoofs dying away in the distance, then shut the sliding shutters closed, and gathered round the charcoal fire, and wondered what would happen, and whether their comrade would encounter one of those horrible Oni. At last Watanabe reached the gate of Rashomon, but peer as he might through the darkness, he could see no sign of an ogre. "It's just as I thought," said Watanabe to himself. "There are certainly no ogres here. It is only an old woman's story. I will stick this paper on the gate so that the others can see I have been here when they come tomorrow, and I will take my way home and laugh at them all." He fastened the piece of paper, signed by all four companions, on the gate, and then turned his horse's head towards home. As he did so, he became aware that someone was behind him, and at the same time a voice called out to him to wait. Then his helmet was seized from the back. "Who are you?" said Watanabe fearlessly. He then put out his hand and groped around to find out who or what it was that held him by the helmet. As he did so, he touched something that felt like an arm. It was covered with hair, and as big round as the trunk of a tree. Watanabe knew at once that this was the arm of an ogre, so he drew his sword and cut at it fiercely. There was a loud yell of pain, and the ogre dashed in front of the warrior. Watanabe's eyes grew large with the wonder, for he saw that the ogre was taller than the great gate. His eyes were flashing like mirrors in the sunlight, and his huge mouth was wide open, and as the monster breathed, flames of fire shot out of his mouth. The ogre thought to terrify his foe, but Watanabe never flinched. He attacked the ogre with all his strength, and thus they fought face to face for a long time. At last the ogre, finding that he could neither frighten nor beat Watanabe, and that he might himself be beaten, took Watanabe therefore had a box made of the strongest wood and banded with iron. In this he placed the arm, and then he sealed down the heavy lid, refusing to open it for anyone. He kept the box in his own room and took charge of it himself, never allowing it out of his sight. Now one night he heard someone knocking at the porch, asking for admittance. When the servant went to the door to see who it was, there was only an old woman, very respectable in appearance. On being asked who she was and what was her business, the old woman replied with a smile that she had been nurse to the master of the house when he was a little baby. If the lord of the house were at home, she begged to be allowed to see him. The servant left the old woman at the door and went to his master that his old nurse had come to see him. Watanabe thought it strange that she should come at this time of night, but at the thought of the old nurse, who had been like a foster mother to him and whom he had not seen for a long time, a very tender feeling sprang up for her in his heart. He ordered the servant to show her in. The woman was ushered into the room, and after the customary bows and greetings were over, she said, "Master, the report of your brave fight with the ogre at the gate of Rashomon is so widely known that even your poor old nurse had heard of it. Is it really true that what everyone says, that you cut off one of the ogre's arms? If you did, your deed is highly to be praised." I was very disappointed, said Watanabe, that I was not able to take the monster captive, which was what I wished to do, instead of only cutting off an arm. "I am very proud to think," answered the old woman, "that my master was so brave as to dare to cut off an ogre's arm. There is nothing that can be compared to your courage. Before I die, it is the great wish of my life to see this arm," she added pleadingly. "No," said Watanabe, "I am sorry, but I cannot grant your request." "But why?" asked the old woman. "Because," replied Watanabe, "ogres are very revengeful creatures, and if I open the box, there is no telling but that the ogre may suddenly appear and carry off his arm. I have had a box made on purpose with a very strong lid, and in the box I keep the ogre's arm secure, and I never show it to anyone, whatever happens." "Your precaution is very reasonable," said the old woman, "but I am your old nurse, so surely you will not refuse to show me the arm. I have only just heard of your brave act, and not being able to wait till the morning, I came at once to ask you to show it to me." Watanabe was very troubled at the old woman's pleading, but he still persisted in refusing. Then the old woman said, "Do you suspect me of being a spy sent by the ogre?" "No, of course I do not suspect you being the ogre's spy, for you are my old nurse," answered Watanabe. "Then you cannot surely refuse to show me the arm any longer," entreated the old woman, "for it is the great wish of my heart to see for once in my life the arm of an ogre." Watanabe could not hold out in his refusal any longer, and so gave in at last, saying, "Then I will show you the ogre's arm, since you so earnestly wish to see it. Come, follow me." And he led the way to his own room, the old woman following. When they were both in the room, Watanabe shut the door carefully, and then going towards a big box which stood in a corner of the room, he took off the heavy lid. Then he called to the old woman to come near and look in, for he never took the arm out of the box. "What is it like? Let me have a good look at it," said the old nurse with a joyful face. She came nearer and nearer, as if she were afraid, till she stood right against the box. Suddenly she plunged her hand into the box and seized the arm, crying with a fearful voice that made the room shake, "Oh joy, I have my arm back again!" And from an old woman, she was suddenly transformed into the towering figure his usual courage to put an end to him this time. He seized the sword, drew it out of its sheath in a flash, and tried to cut the ogre down. So quick was Watanabe that the creature had a narrow escape, but the ogre sprang up to the ceiling and burst through the roof, disappeared in the mist and the clouds. In this way the ogre escaped with his arm. The knight gnashed his teeth with disappointment, but that was all he could do. He waited in patience for another opportunity to dispatch the ogre, but the latter was afraid of Watanabe's great strength and daring, and never troubled Kyoto again. So once more the people of the city were able to go out without fear, even at night time, and the brave deeds of Watanabe had never been forgotten. That was a good one. I'll do one more. It's a slightly longer one. It's called The White Hare and the Crocodiles. Long, long ago, when all the animals could talk, there lived in the province of Inaba in Japan a little white hare. His home was on the island of Oki, and just across the sea was the mainland of Inaba. Now the hare wanted very much to cross over to Inaba. Day after day he would go out and sit on the shore and look longingly over the water in the direction of Inaba, and day after day he hoped to find some way of getting across. One day, as usual, the hare was standing on the beach looking towards the mainland across the water when he saw a great crocodile swimming near the island. This is very lucky, thought the hare. Now I shall be able to get my wish. I will ask the crocodile to carry me across the sea. But he was doubtful whether the crocodile would consent to do what he wanted. So he thought, instead of asking a favour, he would try to get what he wanted by a trick. So with a loud voice, he called to the crocodile and said, "Oh, Mr. Crocodile, isn't it a lovely day?" The crocodile, who had come out all by itself that day to enjoy the bright sunshine, was just beginning to feel a bit lonely when the hare's cheerful greeting broke the silence. Very pleased to hear someone speak, he swam to the shore. "I wonder who it was that spoke to me just now. Was it you, Mr. Hare? You must be very lonely all by yourself." "Oh no, I am not at all lonely," said the hare. "But it was such a fine day. I came out to enjoy myself. Won't you stop and play with me a little while?" The crocodile came out of the sea and sat on the shore, and the two played together for some time. Then the hare said, "Mr. Crocodile, you live in the sea, and I live on the island, and we do not often meet, so I know very little about you. Tell me, do you think the number of your company is greater than mine?" "Of course, there are more crocodiles than hares," answered the crocodile. "Can you not see that for yourself? You live on this small island, whilst I live in the sea, which spreads through all parts of this world. So if I call together all the crocodiles who dwell in the sea, you hares will be nothing compared to us." The crocodile was very conceited. The hare, who had meant to play a trick on the crocodile, said, "Do you think it is possible for you to call up enough crocodiles to form a line in this island across the sea to Inaba?" The crocodile thought for a moment and then answered, "Of course it is possible." "Then do try," said the artful hare, "and I will count the number from here." The crocodile, who was very simple-minded and who hadn't the least idea that the hare intended to play a trick on him, agreed to do what the hare asked and said, "Wait a little while I go back into the sea and call my company together." The crocodile plunged into the sea and was gone for some time. The hare, meanwhile, waited patiently on the shore. At last the crocodile appeared, bringing with him a large number of other crocodiles. "Look, Mr. Hare," said the crocodile, "it was nothing for my friends to form a line between here and Inaba. There are enough crocodiles to stretch this, however, with your permission, I must walk on your backs to the other side, so please be so good as not to move, or else I shall fall into the sea and be drowned. So the hare hopped off the island onto the strange bridge of crocodiles, counting as he jumped from one crocodile's back to the other. Please keep quite still, or I shall not be able to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Thus the cunning hare walked right across to the mainland of Annaba. Not content with getting his wish, he began to jeer at the crocodiles instead of thanking them, and said as he leapt off the last one's back, "Oh, you stupid crocodiles, now I have done with you." And he was just about to run away as fast as he could, but he could not escape so easily, for so soon as the crocodiles understood that this was a trick played upon them by the hare so as to enable him across the sea, and that the hare was now laughing at them for the stupidity, they became furiously angry and made up their minds to take revenge. So some of them ran after the hare and caught him. Then they all surrounded the poor little animal and pulled out all of his fur. He cried loudly and entreated them to spare him, but with each tuft of fur they pulled out, they said, "Serves you right." When the crocodile had pulled out the last bit of fur, they threw the poor hare on the beach, and all swam away laughing at what they had done. The hare was now in a pitiful plight. All of his beautiful white fur had been pulled out, and his bare little body was quivering with pain and bleeding all over. He could hardly move, and all he could do was lie on the beach quite helplessly and weep over the misfortune that had befallen him. Notwithstanding that it was all his own fault that had brought upon this misery and suffering upon the white hare of Annaba, anyone seeing the poor little creature could not help feeling sorry for him in this sad condition, but the crocodiles had been very cruel in their revenge. Just at this time, a number of men, who looked like the king's sons, happened to pass by, and seeing the hare lying on the beach crying, stopped and asked what was the matter. The hare lifted up his head from between his paws and answered them, saying, "I had a fight with some crocodiles, but I was beaten, and they pulled out my fur and left me here to suffer. This is why I am crying." Now one of these young men had a bad and spiteful disposition, but he feigned kindness and said to the hare, "I feel very sorry for you. If you will only try it, I know of a remedy which will cure your sore body. Go and bathe yourself in the sea, and then come and sit in the wind. This will make your fur grow again, and you will be just as you were before." Then all the young men passed on. The hare was very pleased, thinking that he had found a cure. He went and bathed in the sea, and then came out and sat where the wind could blow upon him. But as the wind blew and dried him, his skin became drawn and hardened, and the salt increased the pain so much that he rolled on the sand in his agony and cried aloud. Just then another king's son passed by, carrying a great bag on his back. He saw the hare and stopped and asked why he was crying so loudly. But the poor hare, remembering that he had been deceived by one very like the man who now spoke to him, did not answer and continued to cry. But this man had a kind heart and looked at the hare very pityingly and said, "You poor thing, I see that your fur is all pulled out and that your skin is quite bare. Who could have treated you so cruelly?" When the hare heard these kind words, he felt very grateful to the man, and encouraged by his gentle manner, the hare told all that had befallen him. The little animal had nothing from his friend, but told him frankly how he had played a trick on the crocodiles, and how he had come across the bridge that they had made, thinking that he wished to count their number, how he had jeered at them for their stupidity, and how the crocodiles had revenged themselves on him. Then he went on to say how he had been deceived by a party of men who looked very like his kind friend, do this, the pollen will cause your fur to grow again, and you will be quite well in a little while. The hare was so glad to be told what to do so kindly. He crawled to the pond pointed out to him, bathed well in it, and then picked the cap of flowers growing near the water and rolled himself on them. To his amazement, even while he was doing this, he saw his nice white fur growing again. The pain ceased, and he felt just as he had done before all of the misfortunes. The hare was overjoyed at his quick recovery and went hopping joyfully towards the young man who had so helped him, kneeling down at his feet, saying, "I cannot express my thanks for all you have done for me. It is my earnest wish to do something for you in return. Please tell me who you are." "I am no king's son, as you think me. I am a fairy. My name is Ukuni Nushi Numkoto," answered the man, "and those beings who passed here before me are my brothers. They have heard of a beautiful princess called Yukami who lives in this province of Inaba, and they are on their way to find her and to ask to marry one of them. But on this expedition, I am only an attendant, so I am walking behind them with this great big bag on my back." The hare humbled himself before this great fairy Okuni Nushi no Mokoto, whom many in that part of the land worshipped as a god. "Oh, I did not know that you were Okuni Nushi no Mokoto. How kind you have been to help me. It is impossible to believe that that unkind fellow who sent me to bathe in the sea is one of your brothers. I am quite sure that the princess who your brothers have gone to seek will refuse to be the bride of any of them, and will prefer you for your goodness of heart. I am quite sure that you will win her heart without intending to do so, and she will ask to be your bride." Okuni Nushi no Mikoto took no notice of what the hare said, but bidding the little animal goodbye, went on his way quickly and soon overtook his brothers. He found them just entering the princess's gate. Just as the hare had said, the princess could not be persuaded to become the bride of any of the brothers, but when she looked at the kind brother's face, she went straight up to him and said, "To you I give myself," and so they were married. This is the end of the story. Okuni Nushi Namakoto is worshipped by the people in some parts of Japan as a god, and the hare has become famous as the white hare of Inaba. But what became of the crocodiles? Nobody knows. I love these little stories. There's enough of them to do at least one more episode of these if you guys are interested. So please, if you have enjoyed these little Japanese folklore and fairy tale stories, let me know, and I'll continue to do some more further on. Thank you again. I'm going to say this every video. The support from you